Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 399. Book of Revelation. Part 1. Gugugugugu. Inside the screen, constellations of good and evil were emitting scary auras towards each other. The taut tension was stretched firm like a rubber band, ready to snap at any given moment. And it was the smallest, but also bright, nebula that managed to maintain the balance. It's been truly a long time since I last saw everyone from good and evil gather in one place. The guardian of the mandala, Sakyamuni, was looking at the screen with an unreadable expression on his face. Ancient memories were flowing within his irises. The scenario before the scenarios, the era when good, evil, and the keepers of neutrality were working together. The tale of everyone working together to fight the dragon of apocalypse, in order to prevent the advent of the apocalypse itself. I'd also like to help my companions. Sakyamuni heard that voice and shifted his gaze towards a small cistern. A small ball of soul glowing faintly was speaking to him while hovering inside the tank. When will I be able to reincarnate? That place isn't your battlefield, oh dear child. You shall reincarnate as a being born to carry out an even greater purpose. They are my purpose. Even after becoming a soul, Yu Sengha's voice remained resolute. If I don't get to save them in that place, then my reincarnation will have no meaning. Meaning, is it? Sakyamuni shifted his gaze again, this time to another cistern located on the opposite side of Yu Sengha's. There was a female incarnation body wearing a Buddhist robe inside this one. You shall be entering the body of a child that I cared about. I'll enter someone else's body? But, I thought I was going to reincarnate? You'll reincarnate with that body as your incarnation body. But, what about the original owner of that body? Sakyamuni didn't reply. Would Buddha feel sorrow, as well? Yu Sengha realized something in that moment. Is that person your meaning? Without saying anything, Sakyamuni continued to observe the Buddhist robe-wearing woman inside the cistern. She has returned to the providence of the cosmos, that is all. Everything is simply an empty revolution of the wheel. Is that really how you feel? You cared about her greatly, yes? You shall understand it soon enough, child. Becoming a reincarnator is precisely that, after all. I'm not a reincarnator yet. You'll soon realize that there is no meaning in being bound by such shackles, and how everything you held dear was simply an exercise in futility. Is jinxing someone else your hobby? I only speak of the truth, dear child. Sakyamuni looked at the battlefield inside the screen once more. Constellations that had lived for a very long time were in there. Constellations suffer from insomnia for all of their lives. They can't fall asleep without the scenarios, and even when they dream, they still ingurgitate the fables of others. Through this greedy devouring, they wish to erase the scenarios they find themselves in. And they feel anxious all the time, even though they don't understand why they feel that way. The most ancient constellation among all of them, Sakyamuni, continued to speak. As if they are stuck in the eternal daydream, they can't escape from the scenario. They look away from death, so they don't know its true meaning. And because they don't know death, they can't wake up from the scenario's illusion. They all mistakenly believe that there is one story somewhere that might save them. Constellations either sponsoring Kim Dokja Company or being hostile towards them were sending indirect messages inside the screen. Sakyamuni slowly moved its gaze towards the middle of that busy screen. However, reincarnators are different. That was where the reincarnators from this island could be found. They had followed after Kim Dokja Company. And they were still being forced to slave under the great fable after joining the side of either good or evil. Sakyamuni looked at them and spoke. Reincarnators will live on forever like constellations, but they must die and be reborn again. They know what it means to awaken since they understand death. And because they know the meaning of awakening, they also come to realize that they are simply a cog in the scenario's machination. Reincarnation is to comprehend the scenario's true essence. Reincarnators with low status will lose their memories along with their death, but that was not the case for everyone. There were some who retained their former memories, like Nirvana, when they reincarnated. They would reincarnate into various species and various genders and continue on with the scenario. As a human, as a toad, as an orc, as an elf, as an ant. Most likely, they acquired those expressions after experiencing countless reincarnations. They all seem to have resigned themselves. That's because they understand nothing will change regardless of who wins. Scenarios can be changed. That's what we have been doing so far. However, that hasn't changed the fact that it's still a scenario. So, you must give up now? Because, no matter what you do, the scenario will remain as a scenario? That's just you trying to run away. That's the same as conceding defeat without even fighting first. Oh, dear child. You're now insulting the lives of the reincarnators. They have continuously fought against scenarios through their countless lives. Have you ever fought with everything on the line, not giving up on a single lifetime in the process? Sakyamuni shut his mouth after hearing that question. Not giving up on a single lifetime, she said. Before he could reply, though, Yu Sangha spoke first. There is a person who hadn't given up on his life even if it went past 1,800 times. Yu Sangha looked at the screen. There was a man wearing a black coat within it. There's another person who had lived that life alongside him, too. And then, a man wearing a white coat standing next to him was observing his companions. His gaze stopped last at Yi Hyansong, collapsed on the floor. This body has experienced a far too extensive period of time to count the numbers. However, there is one number that I can still count. Sakyamuni continued on as he looked at Yi Hyansong. One more will be added to this island's reincarnators. Not yet. I felt for the unmoving Yi Hyansong's pulse. It wasn't beating. He wasn't breathing either, and only whites could be seen after his eyelids were opened. Really? Zhang Huiwen looked at me with a face of someone wanting to believe in miracles. I looked at her whitened hair and guessed what had happened here. For sure, he's not dead. My companions all carried complicated expressions. Ejihai seemed to think that I was lying out of good intentions, while Gilyang looked as if he'd believe me even if I was really lying. Han Suyang asked me, "Have you decided to change the definition of death now? If Hyansong SSI has died for real, then the Master of Steel would have been kicked out of the scenario, too." I looked up into the sky. Although I couldn't hear any indirect messages to that effect, the Master of Steel hadn't been ejected out of this scenario. Zhang Huiwen urgently grabbed my arm. Then, why Hyansong SSI is? Just like how you've awakened, Hyansong SSI has also awakened, Huiwen SSI. I shifted my gaze down to the faint fragments of a fable flowing on Yi Hyansong's skin, the fable of steel. It was not visible from the outside, but his inside should be filled to the brim with the fable of steel, by now. Character, Yi Hyansong, is on the verge of attribute evolution. It was not for nothing that Yi Hyansong was referred to as the greatest shield in the original story. Protecting someone by sacrificing himself would let the Emperor of Steel Sword to reach the final stage of the steel transformation. By the time he regains his consciousness, he should have become the world's sturdiest shield. Zhang Huiwen asked me in a trembling voice. In that case, he's still alive? Yes. Is that the truth? You're not lying? Tears trickled down her collapsed cheeks. She then placed her hand on Yi Hyansong's chest. His heart wasn't beating. While feeling that indifferent silence, she spoke again in some difficulty. But, I can't hear anything. It'll be like that from now on. Pardon? I looked at Yi Hyansong again. His heart had hardened like steel, boasting a 100% purity rating. It had never beat again. The current Zhang Huiwen wouldn't be able to understand what that meant, though. However, Hyansong SSI is definitely alive. So, please, don't worry. In any case, he won't be of any use to us now, said Yu Yonghayak indifferently as he unleashed his status. Every one of you, keep your wits about you. This isn't the time to wallow in sadness. Kugugugugu. Two camps glaring at our nebula could be seen on the other side of the battlefield. One camp was good, while the other, evil. To us, they were simply enemies, though. The centers of those two camps were manned by Scribe of Heaven, Metatron, and ruler of East Hell, Agars. Who defeated Barbados? That question caused the murmurings to spread out through the battlefield. Barbados, ranked 8th in the Demon King rankings, had died. However, rather than looking stunned, the Demon King's present carried entertained expressions, instead. To think you'd interfere with the great war of saints and demons, you all have lost your minds. Their gazes, locked onto my companions, were filled with clear ridicule. Their jeers were filled with the confidence of knowing that we'd not be able to rely on luck to survive anymore, like how we'd been doing until now. Their guesses were right, the members of Kim Dokja Company were in no shape to fight properly at the moment. Yu Yonghyok's magical energy reserve had almost bottomed out from the fight against Indra, while Han Suyang was also in an extremely fatigued state after fighting against the archangels. There was no need to mention the collapsed Di Hyansong or the worn-out Zhang Huiwen either. The ones that would prove to be helpful were the 3 kids who went to the next city. Juicy, don't you worry. I'll sweep them all away. Jihai pounding her chest while saying that, and Shin Yusung nodding her head along, instilled much confidence in me. Like how I imagined it to be, they must have experienced incredible growth in next city. Even Gilyong's eyes were sparkling brightly, as well. Hyung, who should we start killing first? Who will give us the highest experience points? Even though we were in an overwhelmingly disadvantageous position, he spoke as if he was playing a game. Incarnation Gilyong's sponsor is looking at you. I shook my head. It was too early. It wasn't the time to utilize Gilyong yet. And even if I did, there was no guarantee of victory. Anna Croft next to me asked a question. Are you really going to fight? You must know that there is no hope of victory for you here, yes? It was rather obvious what she was aiming for as she asked that question. She was already a part of the good camp. It had proved to be the most ideal outcome for her to stab me in the back if things go wrong and join that side. We've never enjoyed good odds of victory, anyway. And yes, I'm planning to fight them, and I'm also confident of winning. As long as you don't betray us, that is. Anna Croft narrowed her eyes at the mention of betrayal and raised her hand up. When she did, Selena Kim and Ira standing behind her took a step forward. Nebula, Asgard, is backing Kim Dokja Company. Constellations and Demon Kings shouted out in sheer astonishment. Asgard, have you lost your minds, too? The god of hammers must have finally hit his own head. Oh, the god of mischief. Are you perhaps planning to cause chaos in this place? Even as the true voices were confusedly flying around, there were a few who still broke out in a smirk as if the situation was unfolding in an entertaining direction for them. Such as, the 5th-ranked Demon King, Black Mane Lion, Marba. What a foolish decision, oh dear Asgard. Your nebula might be powerful, but the number of constellations participating is low. It is simply far too inadequate to rock this battlefield. It's not just one nebula. Oh, then who else is there? Kim Dokja Company? You really want to call the small group with you as its sole constellation, a nebula? Loud peals of laughter rang out among the Demon Kings. But then, Constellation, father of the rich knight, is icily glaring at the constellations. Nebula, Underworld, is backing Kim Dokja Company. The laughter came to a sudden end. The Underworld? Oh, Olympus. What is going on? Isn't that a subordinate nebula of yours? Along with those words, a corner of the battlefield opened up and Olympus made their appearance. As expected, they were participating in this scenario as well. The one standing at their forefront was a constellation we were quite familiar with. This is troublesome. We can't reenact Gigantomachia in this place either. It was the god of wine and ecstasy, Dionysus, carrying a deeply awkward smile on his face. Dionysus, are you planning to fight us? Phew, you're making me hanker for some booze right now. He pulled a bottle out from his inner pocket and gulped down some wine. Arg, I don't care. I'll just worry about it after getting drunk first. Demon King of Salvation, why don't you have a sip, too? We've got a lot of things to talk about, right? Thank you for the offer, but now doesn't seem to be a good time for that. Dionysus smirked and raised a toast in my way. That was the same thing as Olympus giving me an answer, though. They wouldn't back us, but they wouldn't get hostile with us either. Now that a great nebula had suddenly decided to postpone their participation, a certain flustered atmosphere permeated into the camps of good and evil. I didn't miss that opening and dug right in. Well, looks like the introductions are over and done with, now. So, let's start fighting, already. My provocations aroused the wrath of constellations and demon kings from both camps. Anna Croft must have not expected me to be this direct, because she was now looking at me with an expression that said, "Are you insane?" Han Suyong spoke up. "You're surprisingly slow in the uptake for a prophet, aren't you? Just sit back and watch." Anna Croft closed her mouth shut after being rebuked by Han Suyong. In the meantime, a demon king stepped forward while unsheathing a jet-black sword. Even though the situation was turning more volatile, both Agars and Metatron maintained their silence. Many demon kings are displaying strong animosity towards you. Along with a sharp noise of air splitting apart, the demon king's sword moved towards me, but at that moment, a message popped up. Members of the same camp clashed against each other. Increase in chaos points have accelerated. Chaos points have risen up by 1. Current chaos points, 76. The Demon King blinked its eyes in sheer shock. And in the distance, I could see the hardened expressions of Metatron and Agars, too. They were now staring at the night skies of the star stream. They must have realized it by now. In order to attract the attention of the constellations, I used my true voice. The opponents you wish to fight are neither good or evil. Kim Dokja Company included members of both good and evil. And becoming hostile with our nebula meant that you were going against the very essence of the great war of saints and demons itself. If you want to kill us, I'm sure you can. However, what will happen to you if you do? On the far side of the sky, the clouds filled with the aura of chaos were swirling around ominously. When the chaos points go past 80, the countdown to the apocalypse would begin. Which meant that it'd be a game of chicken from now on. Most ancient good is glaring at you. Most ancient evil is glaring at you. It was the game where the first one to get scared and back off would become the loser. Which one will be faster, us dying or all of you getting annihilated by the apocalypse dragon? Aren't you curious? I unsheathed unbreakable faith and smiled. I'm really curious, actually. Chapter 400. Book of Revelation. Part 2. If you were to unpack the contents of my declaration, then they went along the lines of kill us, and you will definitely die, too. At first, the constellations were agitated, then they began whispering among themselves, and finally, silence descended in their midst. Some stared at Agars, while the others, at Metatron. They were the holders of the highest authorities on this battlefield, but they simply maintained their silence with unreadable expressions on their faces. However, even though no orders were issued, the clouds of war unexpectedly began churning slowly on the outskirts of the gathered masses. Kim Dokja Company. We know very well what you're trying to do. It was a constellation from Papyrus who roared out with true voice. However, we still have a score to settle with you. I wonder about that. It's hard to tell who is owing who here. My retort prompted the constellations of Papyrus to free their weapons from their sheaths. You said that you're neither good nor evil. That also means you are both good and evil, too. Nebula, Papyrus, had chosen to affiliate themselves with evil. We will kill all those B** stars that have sided with good, at the least. What a wise decision that was. The chaos points only rose up when good fought against good and likewise, when evil fought against evil. Papyrus had figured out a way to judge us without going against the rules of this battlefield. The most ancient evil wishes for your elimination. The most ancient good wishes for your elimination. We were nothing more than viruses in this great war of saints and demons, hosts that interfered with a system that was operating normally to spread infections around. With Papyrus as the center, the waves of good and evil were growing larger and larger. Constellations burning in animosity towards each other only a few moments ago were now all redirecting their hostilities towards us. Kugugugugu. The expressions of my companions froze up. Yu Yonghyuk changed his attitude and spoke. Kim Dokja. He must have known it, too, even if Underworld and Asgard were with us, even if the members of Kim Dokja Company were in one place. If we clashed directly against them, then someone in our group would definitely die. Suddenly, my perception sped up and time slowed down somewhat. Their advancing speed is quicker than I thought. Too many constellations came to their decision too quickly. Maybe, I should have reached 80 in the chaos points first. Several sentences flitted in and out of my head. I recalled the ways of survival. Who should I ask for help if I were to emerge victorious from this situation? My adopted parents in the underworld? The great sage, the equal of heaven, who hadn't participated in the war yet? Or, the outer god-grade secretive plotter? Cheok Junjiang and the constellations from the Korean peninsula? Even the faces of my teachers and Jang Haiyang floated up to the fore, too. Especially Jang Haiyang, although I desperately needed help, I thought that it'd be for the best if she didn't show up. Fruit of good and evil is stimulating your guilty conscience. Maybe, this could be my sense of responsibility. I hoped that Jang Haiyang, born to this world because of me, wouldn't get swept up in the scenarios. My small wish that she'd get to live her own story in her own terms. The reason why I didn't advise Jang Haiyang to join Kim Dokja Company or reveal the information on the future was that I felt such ambivalent emotions. Aahak. The ranks of the reincarnators meeting the enemies at the forefront were collapsing. They screamed as tsunami waves swept them up and tore them apart. Die. Han Suyang looked at the constellations and demon kings rushing at us while spouting trite remarks, and smiled nervously. Looks like we're going to win. Those muttering such lines would die the quickest, you see. The corners of the companion's lips twitched energetically at her timely joke. Here they come. Their utterances might have been trite, but their statuses were certainly not. Good and evil might have been the stalest of fables in this world, but it was also one of the most powerful, as well. The nervousness I felt through my skin was different from all the other battlefields I had experienced so far. This was all for real. This was the great war of saints and demons, and this was the true power of the constellations. Kwa. The status of good and evil, seemingly large enough to completely blanket the entire great battlefield, its crashing waves had reached right before our noses in no time at all. 300 meters. 200 meters. 100 meters. Yu Yonghyuk spoke. Now. Everyone knew what their roles were. The members of Kim Dokja Company unleashed their statuses simultaneously. Narrators of Nebula, Kim Dokja Company, have gathered. Fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Fable, Torch that swallowed the myth, has begun its storytelling. Demon World Spring wrapped around us as if to protect us, and Torch that swallowed the myth began screeching as if it'd rip anyone approaching us to shreds. Still, these two alone wouldn't be enough to stop them from coming. Even if they were the same great fables, the time experienced was different. That enormous gap couldn't be bridged with the 50 years in Keixenix archipelago. Even then, this was our story. 30 meters. E.G. Hai finished loading the cannons and raised her sword up high. Just as the dragonhead figurehead began reddening up as the maritime war god's blessing descended upon us. Wait. I stopped E.G. Hai. Her jaw slackened from shock. I reached out and grasped her sword, faltering aimlessly in the air. The cannon on the verge of firing withdrew its energy. What the hell are you doing, a juicy? Other companions were also surprised by my unexpected action. To think I'd suddenly interfere when we found ourselves in a situation where we'd surely die even if we struggled with all our might. Rather than a verbal answer, I pointed towards the opposite side, instead. With exactly 10 meters to go, the waves of good and evil had come to a standstill as if it was all a lie. Suchachachuchit. As if they were being powerfully restrained by something. The faces of constellations grumbling away and the demon king spewing out choice words could be seen pretty close to us. Some carried dissatisfied expressions, while others looked relieved. But, why so suddenly? I realized the reason pretty soon. A single constellation and a single demon king were floating up above the frozen tsunami wave, that was why. They were Metatron and Agars. Two of the strongest beings in this battlefield had for the first time unleashed their true voices. All constellations, withdraw your hostilities and return to your positions. The battle will be paused for the time being. I raised my head up towards the air above after hearing their sudden declaration of a ceasefire. The reason for the ceasefire could be seen etched in that spot. Chaos points have surpassed 80. Countdown to apocalypse has begun. Chaos points of 80. It really was a close call, too close for comfort. What saved us wasn't constellations or the demon kings. No, it was the weakest faction in this battlefield, instead. There must have been the cases of the same camps clashing during the reincarnators dying at the front line. Weak good was still good, and weak evil was still evil. The good and evil became obsessed only with killing us, and as a consequence of disregarding such weaklings, it was now on the path towards the apocalypse. From here on, chaos points will rise by 1 point every 30 minutes. Once the chaos points exceeded 80, its rate of increase would speed up. Even if there was no clash from here onwards, it'd continue to climb up, and in exactly 10 hours, it'd reach the critical point. In other words, the revival of the apocalypse dragon would commence. The most ancient calamity at the deepest part of hell is feeling pleased. One of the absolute worst calamities in the history of the star stream, the apocalypse dragon. Whether it be the good or evil camp, none wanted to see its revival. Once the dragon revives, at least a quarter of all constellations in the star stream would die, that was why. Anyone from this battlefield could become part of that quarter. Great battlefield of great war of saints and demons has come to a temporary standstill. Representatives of good and evil are currently in an emergency conference. And so, that message floating in the air signified both good and evil struggling bitterly in order to survive no matter what. You have accomplished a feat no one has achieved so far. A myth-grade fable is germinating within you. Your new modifier will reflect this fable. Chet. I wanted to see how much stronger I got, though. I patted Gilliong's head as the boy grumbled to himself. We were currently sitting inside the passenger compartment of the battleship, Turtle Dragon. Zhang Huiwan and Shin Yusung were nursing Yi Hyansung as he lay unmoving like a dead man, while Yi Jihai looked wholly unconvinced by something else. Is this really the end? But, we haven't even fought for real, though? Even though she said that, there was a relieved expression on her face as well. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is congratulating you on your success. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is feeling apologetic towards you. Uriel? It'll be fine to speak in your true voice. Uriel, currently squatting by the corner of the cabin, lowered her head towards me. For some reason, I thought I could understand where she was coming from, just a little bit. Right now, she felt responsible. The fact that her nebula had attacked Kim Dokja Company, and then, in regards to the things done by those claiming to be absolute good, too. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is looking up at you with tearful eyes. You don't have to worry, Uriel. We don't hate you. And as for Eden, honestly speaking, my grievances towards them aren't much. We've received their help before, too. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, asks if you're telling the truth. I was lying. However, it'd only hurt Uriel if I revealed how angry I was. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, says that the scribe isn't such a bad being. I also know what kind of a constellation Metatron is. Please, you should rest for a bit, I said, before leaving the cabin. 30 minutes have elapsed. Chaos points are rising up by 1. Current chaos points, 82. Alongside the messages entering my ears, there it was, a giant gray sphere, floating up in the air. Its inside couldn't be spied on. Most likely, every single top-ranked demon king and archangel was in there, having a conference right about now. And it was also quite likely that the good and evil were talking crap about Kim Dokja Company and Demon King of Salvation in one voice, too. Kim Dokja. I flinched and looked back to find Han Suyong staring at me. I spoke first. Whenever you call out my name lately, I can't help but get scared first. It's like, you must have caused another accident. It's you who causes accidents instead, complained Han Suyong, before shifting her gaze over to the sphere and asking me. What are they really thinking about? What do you mean? Isn't this whole thing unfolding too smoothly? It's because they don't want to die, either. You really think that's all? She narrowed her eyes and glared at me. Fable, predictive plagiarism, is continuing its storytelling. Judging from the whitish fragments of the fable floating around, it seemed that she had activated predictive plagiarism and kept it up ever since that conference had commenced. I asked her. What do you think, then? They are just too quiet. Even if they are terrified of the apocalypse dragon. Something just feels off, you know. Indeed, the instincts of an author could be very sharp. Actually, I agreed with her opinion, too. A conference of good and evil, it sure sounded nice. However, the Metatron I knew would never back off in such circumstances. He was the type of guy who'd sacrifice anyone in order to perfectly fulfill the absolute goods premise. I stared at the gray sphere and spoke. I don't know what they are cooking up over on that side, but there is a way to find out what will happen in the future. What is that? I looked straight at Han Suyong. And soon, her jaw dropped. God damn it, we had that method, didn't we? Whether it was a conference or war, it had come to an end in the next 9 hours. And if it was that sort of a near future, then we knew of a being who could read it better than anyone else in this world. We quickly dashed towards the cabin at the rear. The thing was, the person we were looking for was already with us by now. Hey, Miss Prophet. We barged into the room, only to find an unexpected guest there. Yu Young-hyuk and his scary scowl were busy grabbing onto Anna Croft's collars at that moment. He spoke. What bullshit are you talking about? It is exactly as I said. The shocked Han Suyong hurriedly shouted out. Hey, you crazy bastard! What are you doing? Yu Young-hyuk looked back at us with an emotionless expression before releasing Anna Croft's collars. She formed a refreshing grin after discovering us and waved her hand. Thank you for saving me. As expected of the Demon King of Salvation. Well, I wasn't really trying to save you or anything, but... You came to see me for the same reason, I suppose? Han Suyong and I stared at Yu Young-hyuk. And he glared right back as if to ask why we were looking at him. As expected, he was really quick with things like this. He came up with a solution to this situation way quicker than us, in other words. Han Suyong began gnashing her teeth as she was unhappy about this. Sadly, though, he didn't carry the expression of a victor. Anna Croft spoke. Let me get right to it, then. I can't see the future. What do you mean by that? Several thoughts floated up in my head, then. Now that I thought about it, Anna Croft couldn't predict the future related to me. I remembered that the fourth wall had something to do with it. What did she say back then? Was it, there's noise hiding the future, as if someone drew graffiti all over it? But then, Anna Croft was shaking her head. It's not the noise obscuring the future, but I simply can't read it at all. It's not as if someone has doodled on the page, but more like the page with the doodling on it didn't exist in the first place. Han Suyong and I exchanged glances. An ominous foreboding slowly crept up over me. Kim Dokja, this. Not like doodlings on a page, but the page itself had disappeared. No matter how hard I thought about it, there could only be one type of future like that. Can it be? Can it be? As if it was waiting for this moment, messages suddenly floated up in the air. Chaos points is rising up by 1 point. Current chaos points, 83. But, it hasn't been 30 minutes yet? It's not rising up because the time has elapsed, said Yu Hyuk in a hardened voice. Time hadn't passed by, yet the chaos points had risen up. In that case, there could only be one possibility. Members from the same camp have clashed. Current chaos points, 84. Someone was trying to destroy this world. Chapter 401. Book of Revelation. Part 3. Members from the same camp have clashed. Current chaos points, 85. We were left completely dazed at the same time after looking at those system messages. Just who is it? Han Suyang threw out that question after somehow squeezing it out of her lips. No one could answer her, however. She asked again. It can't be the kids going around causing accidents, right? I retorted back. You think they are like you? Even if they were still just kids, they wouldn't do something so rash with our situation being what it was. Sure, I was slightly worried about Gil Yong, but... I looked at Anna Croft and addressed her. Anna. I'm still searching. Although the page of the future had been ripped away, the events leading up to its disappearance should still remain. Just like how a defective book would still need some time before it got destroyed. Chaos points are increasing. We can't leisurely wait any longer. The first one to fly out of the room was Yu Hyuk. Anna Croft's forehead was soaked in sweat drops as she endeavored to find the pages of the future. In the end, both Han Suyang and I decided to move, as well. Anna, once you find something, let me know through voice projection. We left her behind and flew out of the cabin. Our companions had gathered on the deck after sensing that something was wrong. Dokja SSI, what's going on? I conveyed the situation in the simplest terms possible when Zhang Huiwan asked me. Some people are attacking their own camp. Ying? Why do something like that, said Ji Hai, while frowning to show that she couldn't understand it. I thought everyone would die if those chaos points went up any higher. Isn't that why angels and demon kings went inside that thing? Can they be people with similar goals as our own? If that was the case, then they wouldn't have increased the chaos points at this point in time. I didn't need to explain in detail, but my companions seemed to have arrived on their own answers. In that case, could it be? I nodded my head. No matter what happens, we must stop them. If we don't, something really horrifying will occur. What kind of crazy bastards would? But, why? Why would anyone try to speed up the destruction of the world? I found it hard to provide a proper answer to that. However, there was this one thing in the star stream that worked as the universal answer to every single indecipherable situation imaginable. There are truly a vast array of fables in this world, you know. It wasn't only good and evil that existed in this world. Just like Kim Dokja Company, that was neither good nor evil existed, there were people in this world chasing after those fables we simply couldn't relate to. Some would live to prevent the end times, but some would only live for the apocalypse. Suchu-chu-chu-chu. Probability was shifting unstably in the air, sparks erupted in several places on the battlefield. Yu Hyuk standing on top of the figurehead seemed to have latched onto the location of the biggest arcs of sparks. There are 5 in total. Scatter, now. He finished giving orders, and his figure disappeared towards the north. I quickly gave instructions to my companions. Han Suyang, you take the east. Yu Sung-yi, Ji Hai, and Gilyang-yi, you guys take the south, please. Huiwan SSI, please remain on the battleship, since we don't know what might happen. What about you, Dokja SSI? I'll head west. Sparks were exploding in all directions. 1 by the north, 1 by the east, 1 by the west, and 2 by the south. We don't know yet which camp started raising chaos. If it's done by the members of the same camp as you, don't fight them and call for other companions. The situation had flipped on its head now. If we had increased the chaos points by fighting good with good and evil with evil, then we needed to fight good with evil and vice versa. Only by sticking to the original rule of the Great War of Saints and Demons could we prevent the increase in the chaos points. Damn it, I'm really annoyed that our situation has changed so suddenly like this. I get why the constellations were so pissed off earlier. We're going ahead. E.g. Hai and the kids departed first, and right afterwards, Han Suyang and I also made our move. Her figure, as she dashed forward while scattering black flames about, was filled with wounds, both large and small. I spoke to her. Be careful. She scowled ever so slightly and flew towards the east. This punk, I was only worried about her, but even then. You be careful, instead. Idiot. The midday tryst, arriving a beat later, made me feel a bit strange. Was I overthinking it when I found both Yu Yunghyak and Han Suyang had changed a lot? Chaos points are increasing. Current chaos points, 86. I activated Way of the Wind and dashed across the air. As I was in the middle of Demon King transformation, the skill's accelerative force had become truly astonishing. I crossed the sky in an instant and arrived at the origin of the sparks. I began to closely scan the vicinity. In hiding, was it? Corpses of reincarnators were strewn about on the battlefield. And there were a handful of terrified survivors that had fallen on their butts, looking at all the dead bodies. Without a doubt, someone went on to massacre the people from the same side here. Exclusive skill, Reading Comprehension, is activating. Attribute, Scenario Interpreter, is activating. Your insight that analyses the situation by collecting circumstantial evidence of the incident has increased. I quickly read the fragments of fables scattered about. I was right about a massacre taking place here. However, I couldn't spot any traces of the culprit running away. Save us, Demon Kingdom. 6 remaining reincarnators knelt down and began prostrating before me. I carefully observed them. Most of the 6 were wounded gravely, blood and fables continuously pouring out from their bodies. Except for this one guy, whose fable happened to be exceptionally stable. You. The eyes of the man slowly raising his head up were filled with a certain evil leer. I spoke while meeting those eyes straight on. Are you a seeker of the end? At that moment, the man desperately lunged at me. But I was already ready for him and easily evaded his attack, before grabbing his neck. Kiok, Kiohik. Exclusive skill, Character List, is activating. As I thought, he was the culprit I was searching for, a Demon King's subordinate. There was no real need to peer deeply into his attribute window anymore. You've begun your actions already? But, it shouldn't be the right time yet? The man with his neck grabbed by me formed a disgusting grin. The great apocalypse will soon come. All scenarios are already set in stone. The noble and absolute fable will come to reality. I recoiled just a little bit after looking at his eyes, glaring like a religious fanatic. Right, most of the seekers of the end were like this guy back in the original story, weren't they? They believed that there was only one absolute fable that supported this world, and that every scenario was merely the will of that fable coming to fruition. Kukakik. I heard the fourth wall's mocking cackle resound in my head. Without a doubt, these seekers of the end had no idea that the fable they thought they knew was actually a novel that I had read already. It's true that a LL are destined to be Detroit edition. There's no such thing as destiny. I recalled the countless regression turns Yu Yunghyak had lived. The Great War of Saints and Demons repeated for hundreds of times, and their conclusions were largely the same. However, that was only during the original story. Speak. How many of you have infiltrated this Great War of Saints and Demons? Juriyuk. Foams bubbled up on the man's mouth. Do you wish to free the apocalypse dragon? You do that, and everything will come to an end. Rather than reaching the end of the fable you've been chasing after, the fable itself will be over, instead. The man didn't reply and simply cackled on. I sighed out. Looks like you don't want to answer. Demon King of Salvation, has unleashed his status. The reincarnators around us screamed at the ripples of the status and quickly backed away. The man who received the brunt of my status head-on shuddered greatly, before blood oozed out from all 7 of his orifices. I spoke without opening my lips. Recite the list of your friends that are participating in this battle. Even under the threat of the imposing status, the man didn't fall into the clutches of fear. No, it was quite the opposite, actually. Demon King of Salvation. He began forming an expression of sheer rapturous ecstasy. As blood continued to leak out of his lips, he began speaking in a voice of someone being saved. Kill me. Hurry. Please kill me. I couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with this guy's head. In any case, I couldn't waste any more time here. If I couldn't extract the list from this guy, then I'd have to personally search around. I was about to smash the man's head in without hesitation, but then, a message suddenly floated up. Members from the same camp have current chaos points, 87. Damn it, I forgot that he was also evil. Just as I let go of his neck, the fable leaking out of his 7 orifices suddenly increased in volume and his body began rapidly expanding. And then, he began smiling in a bizarre manner. Self-detonation sequence, was it? It was too late to dodge. But then, right afterwards, a streak of light flew in from somewhere and penetrated the man's body in a straight line. Quajijijijic. It was a spear made out of light so bright that it must have come from the sun itself. Inside this bright ray of light, the Seeker of the End shuddered as if he was being electrocuted. The explosive power expanding outwardly was now being absorbed into the spear of light. He lost all signs of vitality in an instant, and died after turning into jet black ash. I studied the fable of light being scattered all around me. Wait, didn't I know that fable already? You've forgotten to call for me on such a grand celebration. I'm disappointed, oh, Demon King of Salvation. The moment I heard that true voice, I figured out who it was. Surya. It was the supreme god of light, Surya. He used to be a constellation of Vedas once upon a time, but after the Olympus battle, ended up sharing a great fable with us, instead. You've achieved an amazing level of status since the last time I saw you. I heard that you have defeated Indra. I simply got lucky. True, the absent-minded Indra might come across as a neighborhood dummy sometimes, but still, he's not someone you can defeat by relying on luck. Perhaps because he had left Vedas, Surya didn't seem all that perturbed while talking about Indra's fate. He scanned the fragments of the Seeker of the End he ended just now, and spoke. I was wondering why the great fable state fell off, but now I see that Seekers of the End have shown up in this place. Were you aware of them? These bastards had infiltrated Vedas once before. Even Vedas? Now that I thought about it, I heard somewhere that there was an internal conflict taking place in Vedas before. Maybe the Seekers of the End were responsible for that? Suchachit. Sparks dancing around in all corners of the battlefield began subsiding at a visible pace. It was likely that my companions had successfully managed to suppress the situation. It seems that it's been taken care of, more or less. Maybe, there weren't that many who managed to infiltrate this battlefield in the first place. Even though the Seekers of the End had made their entrance, this was a rather tame conclusion. But, then, members from the same camp have clashed. Current chaos points, 88. What? I hurriedly scanned the battlefield, but couldn't see a single spark exploding anywhere. Forget about the same camp this and that, there was no battle taking place at all. Members from the same camp have clashed. Current chaos points, 89. Even then, the chaos points continued to climb higher. A chilling sensation crept down my spine. Hang on, could this be? It's not on the surface. I heard Surya's words and reflexively looked up into the sky. More correctly, at the gray-colored sphere floating up there. Archangels and demon kings should be having a conference within it, yet it was rocking viciously to and fro while an incredible amount of sparks exploded from it. A Seeker of the End was in there, too? Members from the same camp have clashed. Current chaos points, 90. The chaos points would climb only when those in the same side fought against each other. But, if such a thing was happening inside that sphere, atmosphere of the great battlefield is beginning to change. Clouds gathered in the sky began spinning into a massive whirlpool. Aura of calamity at the hottest place in hell is opening its eyes. God damn it. Kugugugugu. Even Surya's expression had hardened noticeably. It seems that I've come seeking my own grave today. Right then, a message I really didn't want to see floated up. Chaos points have exceeded 90. Great fable of apocalypse is beginning to stir. Great fable, final dragon of the Book of Revelation, is getting ready to tell its story. An earthquake erupted throughout the entire great battlefield. The indescribable despair I felt during the 95th scenario was reviving again.